All right, let's jump right into this one because today's explainer has one of the most bizarre and, honestly, fascinating premises we have ever covered. I want you to picture this. An ordinary receptionist, her name's Marta, receives a standard manila envelope. Inside that envelope is a 37-page legal directive, just absolutely packed with dense, lawyerly subclauses. But here's the kicker. This document isn't addressed to a mayor, it's not addressed to a city council, it is addressed to the city itself. The mandate? The city is ordered to produce a first-person, written account of its own existence. It needs to be anywhere from 200 to 1,000 pages long. And the single hardest instruction in this entire 37-page packet? The history must be written in a voice that is recognizably the city's own. So naturally, this begs a really profound question right out of the gate. Did the city even have a self? You see, the core existential problem here is that the city simply didn't know it had a voice. Up until the exact moment this envelope arrived, it had only really known itself through its sounds. Think about it. The mechanical clatter of trams on the streets, the bustling vendors down at the harbor market yelling over live fish, the chiming of its 17 bell towers, and keep in mind, some of those bells hadn't even worked in decades. The city had to somehow take all these disparate echoing sounds and transform them into an intentional, unified I.
Section 1. The Politics of the Archive. To figure out its own history, the city naturally turns to the place where official histories live, the Central Archive, a stark limestone building established back in 1791.
To give you a sense of the scale here, there are exactly 4.2 kilometers of shelving inside this archive, just endless rows of the city's official records, and it's all watched over by this archivist named Sabascio. Now, Sabascio is a guy who has spent 31 years basically hunting for anomalies in the past. But as we'll see, these shelves packed with the accumulated paper of governance only tell a very specific side of the story.
Because here is where we hit a massive contradiction. On one hand, you've got those 4.2 kilometers of official records. We're talking merchant consortium logs, municipal council minutes, going all the way back to 1512, fancy guilds charters. But on the other side, you have the actual lived reality. The archive is completely missing the inner lives of the 8.4 million people who, actually built the city. It completely ignores the unnamed alleys. It misses people like Beatriz, a weaver in 1389 who carefully taught her daughter her craft. The official records obsess over property and power, but they completely gloss over the vast, unrecorded, messy reality of everyday human existence.
To really drive this point home, listen to this incredible anecdote from the sources. One afternoon, a 14-year-old girl walks into this huge, imposing archive and asks to see the oldest document they have. They hand her a replica of a charter from 1352. She doesn't even try to read the Latin. She just traces the shape of it. And then she looks up at the young archivist and asks this incredibly profound question, "Does the city know I'm here?" I mean, wow. That right there perfectly captures the deep human desire for recognition. We all want to know that the place we shape by living in it actually registers our existence.
Moving on to Section 2, Trauma and the Rebuilding. We need to look at how a collective entity actually processes massive, shared trauma. And specifically, we're looking at the devastating earthquake of February 14, 1689.
To really understand the disruption, you have to grasp the sheer, sudden scale of it. 1,203 people died. And get this, the earthquake itself lasted for just 45 seconds. It's a somber, terrifying fact. For the city, this wasn't just a physical collapse. It was a complete tearing of its continuous existence. It was this terrifying realization that it was entirely subject to the physical world, not at all immune to it.
And the trauma wasn't just in the shaking itself. It was in what came right after. The city experienced exactly 11 minutes of agonizing silence following the quake. In the first minute, there was just absolute nothingness, a totally paralyzed shock. By the second minute, the non-human sounds started creeping in, ruined structures settling, water sloshing wildly out of the harbor. The city just waited, basically feeling the breath held in the surviving humans' throats. And then, finally, in the 8th minute, a child's cry. That single solitary note of distress was the sound of continuation. It was the exact moment the city realized its consciousness hadn't ended.
So, when the dust settled and it was time to rebuild, a massive ideological clash broke out. You had these capital architects arriving with their official plans. They wanted rational, straight, right-angle grids. Basically, a sterile, mathematical solution to a deeply messy human tragedy. But the surviving population, they completely rejected it. They decided to rebuild their city based on lived desire. They wanted their winding, illogical, pre-rational medieval streets back. And incredibly, they actually rebuilt them from memory.
laying down the paving stones exactly where their feet remembered them being.
Now, why would they go through all that trouble? The answer is hidden in a 214-page journal kept by Isabel, a 27-year-old survivor of the quake. She wrote, "These streets are us. We made them by walking." That is so powerful. To replace those organic streets with an architect's rigid grid was basically saying that a planner's abstract thought mattered more than the people's actual lived experience, and they just weren't having it.
Section 3. Written in the margins. Let's fast forward to 1758. This ongoing battle between official documentation and lived reality finally hits a political climax during the era of the city's formal constitution. I want you to consider two completely different figures from this era. First, you have Afonso Dorado. He's the guy officially commissioned to write the city's constitution. Brilliant guy, sure, but he only interviewed the official face of the city, council members, guild masters. He literally ignored the working class. Now, in stark contrast, meet Leonor Souza Carvalho. She was Afonso's 34-year-old housekeeper. She had absolutely no formal education, but she was secretly reading complex political philosophy in the libraries of her wealthy employers. And when Afonso would leave his constitution drafts sitting around in his study, Leonor would take dark ink and secretly start annotating his drafts right there in the margins.
And I mean, Leonor just completely dismantled his official document. Where Afonso argued that the city's main purpose was to facilitate commerce, Leonor wrote this absolutely brilliant marginal note. She wrote, "Commerce is not a purpose. Commerce is a method. The purpose is life. The people who enable the commerce are not instruments of the purpose. They are the purpose." Talk about flipping the script. She completely took apart the logic of the powerful, demanding that everyday people be recognized as the true center of civic life.
And it gets better. Next to a passage that endlessly praised the wealthy merchant consortium, she penned 3 piercing words: "Where is everyone else?" That right there is the ultimate flaw in basically all official histories. Now, Leonor never got a shiny medal like Afonso did. She lived her entire life in the margins. She actually ended up teaching 43 harbor children to read in an informal, completely unrecorded school. And yet, her hidden actions and her marginal notes shaped the soul of the city far more than Afonso's celebrated official document ever could.
Which brings us to Section 4, Measuring the Unmeasurable. We're jumping ahead now to the 19th century, specifically 1834. This was an era just totally obsessed with quantifying the world. And so, a team of surveyors arrives from the capital, armed with their theodolites, fully intent on measuring the city mathematically.
Led by a man named Engineer Beatriz, these surveyors spent months calculating. They finally determined the city's area was exactly 47.3 square kilometers. And, it was perfectly accurate. But as the city itself notes in its history, while Beatriz perfectly captured the physical area, he completely missed the soul. Because a city isn't just a square kilometer measurement, right? It is what happens inside that space.
To really grasp what the surveyors missed, we have to look at this totally fascinating concept called temporal topography. It's basically the idea that a city is actually measured by how time accumulates. Think about it. In the ancient cathedral quarter, time feels deep, it feels dense and heavy. But down at the harbor, time is fast, it's kinetic, it's always moving. This rich, layered, deeply human reality, it's entirely invisible to a surveyor's measuring tools. There's this incredible recorded interaction that really highlights this failure. Councilman Fonseca is talking to surveyor Beatriz, and he asks him where the city is weakest. Beatriz immediately starts rattling off degraded infrastructure and road repairs. Fonseca stops him right there and says, "No, I mean the places where it is hardest to be a person. I would like the survey to tell me that." Beatriz is flummoxed. He just admits that empirical instruments cannot measure human difficulty. As the saying goes, the instruments know where the walls are, but they don't know why the walls matter.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? Why does this matter for us? Well, a city's true history isn't found in 4.2 kilometers of official archives, and it's definitely not found in a 47.3 square kilometer land survey. The real history is the informal, lived experiences. It's Beatriz the Weaver quietly making choices at her loom in 1389. It's Isabel rejecting sterile city planning because she knew the streets were made by walking in 1689. It's Leonor Souza Carvalho boldly writing radical truths in the margins of a constitution in 1758. It is the beautifully unmappable human experience.
The commission ordered the city to find its voice. And through this process, the city realized its voice was never the official record at all. Its voice was the people. Which leaves us with a final, I think, really provocative thought about your own environment. Take a look around your own life, your own streets, your neighborhood. Are you just living in the city's official archive, or are you out there writing the true, unwritten history of your environment, right there in the margins?